a young athlete's dream, every young athlete's dream is they grow up wishing or dreaming that they are the star of their sport, and they grow up going through high school, dominating their sport, dominating as an athlete. They want to go to college, sign autographs, have fans wearing their jerseys, cheer their name, win a national championship, and every kid grows up wanting to be that as an athlete. And the NCAA fools us because in that story, you're in your dreams, you never realize or never think about getting paid in college, or that's not part of your dream. And they take advantage of that. And the truth is that these players are really the biggest employees that the NCAA has, and the most important asset to their entire business. And the issue mainly is with the bigger schools and the bigger Division I schools, mainly in the Power 5 conferences for the NCAA. Those teams generate most of the revenue for the NCAA, and due to their schools being larger and their athletic programs bringing in more revenue. And it is comical that an education and a scholarship is proper compensation for how much work these athletes are putting in for the revenue of the NCAA. College football is no doubt a full-time job for these athletes, and they put in hard work for countless hours through rough conditions in the summer, winter, negative degrees, whatever you call it. Football players do the hardest thing. And the NCAA gets the best employees basically in the whole entire market, because kids train their entire lives to be employees of the NCAA, but still all they get is a scholarship for it, for education. Chris Isidore tells us in his CNN article that preseason practice for college football consists of about 50 to 60 hours a week for a player, and during the season it goes down to about 40 or 50 hours. That kind of seems like one of the hardest jobs, not just a hard one, but if you think about it, they're not getting compensated for or paid for any of their work, and they're working harder than almost anybody in America, but getting very little from it, and just a scholarship. And the NCAA makes tons of money from marketing these athletes and for these seasons that they're playing and putting in countless hours of work for. Greg Johnson tells us in Student Nation that the NCAA earned $1.15 billion in television ads for the NCAA basketball tournament last year. That doesn't seem quite fair that athletes are generating that many figures of revenue for a company and putting in that much work in their time and getting that little of compensation, when those basketball players were required by the NCAA to come be in college for 1 year, when they might have known that they were going to go pro and known that their education didn't mean anything. But for that 1 year, the NCAA is basically forcing them to work for them and get them $1.15 billion in revenue for just the ads from their tournament. Greg Johnson also says that the reality is that the NCAA cares almost exclusively about players' talent and marketability, none more, no less. Student athlete is a false concept. Universities also gain tons of money from these athletes by the sale of their jerseys and the use of their names and likeness. Dave Curtis from the Orlando Centennial makes a good point by saying that the University of Florida spiked to number 3 in merchandising schools after Tim Tebow won the Heisman and won the national championship. With his jersey sales, the University of Florida spiked all the way to number 3. Colleges, the universities sell their best players' number and put that in their stores and make millions of dollars of revenue from the selling of these guys' jerseys. Like, imagine how many Tim Tebow jerseys you saw that next year, and Tim Tebow saw $0 in compensation for someone making that much money off him. And that's not fair, because Tim Tebow's likeness was used, and without Tim Tebow, the University of Florida made none of that money. So he should get some kind of compensation for that. Scoop Johnson from ESPN tells us that every student who signs a letter of intent or agrees to accept a scholarship to play a sport knows going into that the school's job is to make the most money off of his or her efforts. And that statement is an opposing argument to this argument, but that's not valid, because the NCAA forces these athletes to go to college, even though they might know they're going pro. They're getting forced to go to college, and they're required stay there for at least 3 years before they go to the professional league. And that's unfair because they're not being compensated at all for all the hard work and extra work that they're doing for that school and revenue they're generating when the education that they're getting is mediocre at best, when they're sacrificing so much of their school time for that sport. They should be compensated, and hopefully in the future they will be compensated.